Good evening. I think about Joe Budden. I think he has a song um, that has that in the beginning, and it was a lot of fun to listen to. I hope you are all doing really, really well. Um, I'm coming into a place in my life where there's a sense of responsibility, and it has come so naturally. It's almost just like for the people that I love and that I care about, and literally, it's something that I can't really say I've ever really experienced before, truly, like in a true way, because I grew up with such a people pleaser mentality where there was like sort of like, oh, I'm gonna do it because of like the psychological construct that wanted to like prove myself worthy. But it's so nice to have cleared that sufficiently where I could be like, no, it's actually, this is just something so natural here that, wants to take care of somebody or wants to check in with somebody that I care about to see if, if they need anything, if they're doing okay, if they're ill or not well, if I can go over there and help them in any way. And things really just become so clear, like in this state. It's like there isn't like the noise or confusion that used to exist where there was just like a lot of like mental chatter, a lot of like just psychological suffering, like, and a lot of that suffering was like what people would think of me. So even the people that I care about, right, their opinions of me would really even prevent me from being who I wanted to be with them. And this entire world of like psychological rumination and psychological suffering, it really, really occupied, I guess, 90% of my energy. It was very, very difficult for me to do anything. Even like basic functioning was very, very difficult. And I now realize that I had a lot of trauma because in coming out of it in the last few years during the pandemic, when I actually got the chance to sit and meditate and look and reflect and feel and heal a lot of this trauma, it's only then that I realized how much trauma I was actually carrying. And it was debilitating. It was like life crippling. Like I couldn't actually function for many years. And really the time that I think it really started it was when I was 15 years old, and I really started to notice myself like doze out for like 15 minutes, literally stop paying attention in my high school, my ninth grade chemistry class. I remember that was the first time, and then I would like that first time I remember, I like looked at the clock again and it was like 15 minutes later, and that was the first time I really caught myself not paying attention. And I think this is actually what mental suffering does, right? The mind's job really is just to protect you, right? It's trying to cope with the harsh reality of your life. And life is brutal. There are very, very difficult things that happen to us. And if you are a deeply feeling human being, especially, or if you're very porous to life, or if you've come into this life with, an ability to feel, an ability to perceive, an ability to sense, right? Of course, you're going to be like whiplashed, like things are going to be like difficult things are going to be extraordinarily difficult for you, right? And life is hard as it is. Like, when I was a kid, my dad died as a kid, and my relationship with my mother was never emotionally connected from the start. Like, she was never able to soothe me, and that relationship was very, very traumatic for me. It involved manipulation and abuse, and just never being seen as a child. And so all of these things really, like, even just in the hand of my parents alone, really set me up for extraordinary suffering, which I could say, like, is extraordinary trauma for me, for, I was going to say a child, but it was for me. It happened to be for me. And I know that because by the age of 33, I developed 5 mental conditions. By age 34, I had, my mental suffering had gotten to such a point where, I wasn't, nothing I was doing, and nothing that I used to find relief from was working. So I literally just started meditating on my balcony, and I did that for the next 4 years, not knowing that that's what I was going to do. Literally every single day, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I found myself walking out to the balcony and meditating, and that's what I ended up doing. And now it's 4 years later, and I'm, just coming back into like life, like readjusting and reorienting my body, because the mental suffering was really literally my force of gravity and my center in me. And without that, my body is extremely disoriented. It just needs to remap and restabilize in the new normal. And so that's been a hell of a process so far. But I'm here. And one thing that I really realized is that there's so much clarity. The way that I'm speaking, the way that I'm flowing, I didn't experience this before if you check out some of my older videos. And so I like to think that, all of this healing and all of this shedding, actually, I mean, for me personally, it's really allowed me to experience flow state in a way that I never have before. It's almost like all the obstacles and the blockages that were there before really were just my mind, right? An energy that was just trying to protect me. And what that energy was like an overlay on top. It was like a second guessing for me because of my people pleaser personality, right? Like it was like a completely second overlay that did not trust who I was. And so it was an overlay on top of just a different meaning, a different intention to anything that I would do or anything that I would say. It would question everything. It was almost literally like a different human being that was existing in me as another personality. And this personality took the throne. I operated as this personality all my life. And I can tell you there were times where I experienced presence, right? Like in connection or in the arms of my partner, moments of joy even, like, but the way that I feel now, like just the sort of like steadiness and sturdiness that I have in my character and in my being, it's not something that I experienced before. And if you don't believe that, feel free to check out some of my older videos, because you'll actually get to kind of sense that energy. There was like this energy of like, sort of, I can kind of identify it now as like pleasing or uncertainty, right? It's like an unsure energy, even without words. Like that energy itself is unsure. And it was that energy, I mean, all of the thoughts that I sat with for 4 years, and literally just looked at and dissected and questioned and verified, asked myself, are they true, or felt the pain underneath the story or the thought. Every single thing that I literally processed actually helped me, to now reach this state where, oh my gosh, this is actually who I really am. And this is actually who I was underneath, right? That personality my entire life. And really what that personality experience was like, just being so crippled by other people, because what it had to do out of its survival was place an inflated importance on somebody else and give it such a weight to valuing their opinions and their stories about me. And so I lived in that fantasy. I like to call it a delusion. I lived and I operated according to their opinions of me. And coming out of it, like somebody would ask, well, why couldn't you just like see that and like, and then choose something different, like not choose it, right? Operate from a different place. The thing is, when you are operating this way, it is all that you know. Literally, there is no space. It is you. It is your personality. There is no other you. And so you don't even know that you're operating this way, right? Like it makes up the entire world that you experience, and there isn't anything different. And so for God to literally sit me down at the beginning of the pandemic, this was in 2022, and the way that it happened for me, I mean, was it could be the laws of physics as well, right? Like when your mental suffering reaches a certain peak, then it just like collapses, your ego releases. So that's kind of what happened to me. But when that happens, actually what happens is that because you now have the experience of just like the irreducible force that we are, like the irreducible essence of the universe, whatever that forceless force is that cannot be quantified or measured. Once you have that experience, what happens is that which you are, your personality inside that has been operating as you, starts to rage like hell, right? It starts to rage like hell and starts kicking and screaming, and you go through that abuse essentially for a certain period of time until it works itself out and there is no end to it. What happens is it just merges with life, right? There is no end to this period. It's just that it's such a slow and tedious and brutal process that you are literally brought through now, which is so much like mental sorting, so much like so much that is being rearranged inside your psyche. Like literally all you have to do is just be with it, look and feel when appropriate. And there is no roadmap for this, right? It's going to happen in the way exactly that it happens for you, and then you're going to actually know exactly in the moment, right, what to do, right? Whatever ends up happening is you're going to feel your way through, right? Do I look at it? Do I question if it's true? Do I ask, like, do I see if I can verify this thought, this story that I'm having, or do I feel the pain in it if it's something that's a story that keeps coming up? It feels like it has like this energetic, like a deep energetic like root in it, right? Do I feel it, like, and how do I feel that, right? And this is the question that I think I was asking in the beginning. I remember my partner, when I started having these conversations with him, he would ask the same thing. He was like, what do you mean, like, I have to feel it? And this is the question I think that all of us are asking, because we haven't been taught to feel, right? From an early age, it's like we were suppressed, or we weren't shown that by our parents. And if anything, we were shown the opposite. We were shown to like go into our head, or to achieve, or to play sports, or to somehow our parents were projecting their replacement of feeling onto us. And that's what we ended up doing or being in our life. And so that's really where the imbalance became, right? And And so for me, the imbalance was absorbing the emotions of everybody else. Literally, I was doing that from the time I was born with my mother, and I carried that into my relationship with my partner. I carried that into, like, my relationship with anybody else, all my friends, I'm sure. It's like there was a storyline here that was always playing. It was always imagining the feelings and experiencing the emotions of somebody else. And this is so profound. If you relate to this, if you're a people pleaser, if you're somebody that you feel like you're deeply empathetic, or you feel a lot of people's emotions, what actually that is, right, is if you are suffering that, right, and if you have an imbalance, what that is actually a distortion. It's actually not true to your true nature, because the way that a young child is, if you think about it, right, he sees his friend crying, right, and he puts his hand on his friend's shoulder, right? Let's say a 4-year-old, or and he puts his hand on his friend's shoulder, but he doesn't lose his own center. He's not suffering because his friend is crying, right? He doesn't go into the next moment and start ruminating on the fact that his friend is crying, right? So he doesn't lose the center in his own being. And that's the truth for all of us human beings, right? We have a center, we have a sturdiness and a stability within us that doesn't cripple, it doesn't cave when we meet somebody else who is suffering. And literally to attain this place, to attain this sort of neutrality in me, where I'm not crippled, where I'm not hurt, where I'm not like caving because somebody I care about is suffering, right? To have this center of stability in me is something that I had to work and earn in the last 4 years. And I'm still doing that now, because my nervous system is adjusting so much to like this new normal that and my nervous system is wildly vulnerable, and has been wildly vulnerable, so that even in the moments where somebody will be talking to me about something that elicits fear in me, like their own suffering or their own struggle, or something that they're currently experiencing that's difficult, sometimes I have to like change the topic, or I have to like end the conversation, because my nervous system just is just way too vulnerable, and it'll start like having like it's almost just overwhelming from my body in these very unpleasant situations, sensations, and therefore unpleasant situations for me. So the best thing for me has been like keeping like the topics and the conversations light and normal, and just also remaining steady and sturdy in myself, where like even today when I woke up, I thought about like going to help my uncle who had just who had a surgery done, and I was thinking about, well, what I could actually do, like how I could actually help around the house. And I feel like a lot of my service now is actually coming in the form of my movement, right? Is in the form of coming via action, my action, because before it didn't seem that way. Before it was like I was abnormally absorbing the emotional burdens of people who hadn't done that work in themselves. And the first person that I attracted like this was my partner, my childhood sweetheart from a young age. And I remember, I was probably doing this for him his whole, for the 20 plus years that we had known each other. And then just during the pandemic, while I was going through my own healing, I started noticing a lot of his trauma, and then I distanced myself from him, and he ended up actually I guess that was something that was also a catalyst for him, doing this work for himself, because well, when he left me before the pandemic and he decided not to be with me, that was a catalyst for me, for my awakening, and vice versa. And the two of us have had like such a very extremely strong bond in this lifetime, to think about the effect that we've had on each other. Like literally, like if you can imagine like two people that have no beginning or no end, like don't know where they begin or end, that are so completely enmeshed, like, and the two of us are extremely different human beings. So it's really crazy that could even be the case in the first place. We're completely like opposites in like every way. But the fact that like we have like the closest bond, and we have like so many shared values and principles, and it wasn't always that way, because I was actually a pathological liar, I could say, but when I first met him, but I lived with him for 10 years, even carrying even lying and continuing with these sort of tendencies, and he just loved me unconditionally. And this was before the pandemic, and literally before the pandemic, he had to fly overseas to take care of his father, who was newly diagnosed with cancer, and then I found myself alone for the first time. But before he had left, he had also like declared to me that he couldn't be with me, just out of respect to himself, because what had happened before that was a lot of things started surfacing for me for the first time about the relationship that I had with him up until that point. I had known him for 20 years up until that point, and been living with him for 10 years up until that point, and there were so many lies that I had told, and I wasn't the person. I finally realized at that time that I had this conversation with him, that I hadn't been who I thought I'd been. And I was literally like living as like this completely whole other person. And so out of just, after months of conversations, out of, just respect for himself, he said like, I can't be with you. It was the most heart shattering thing for him. It was the most heartbreaking thing. And it was, nobody in our friend circle, and much less us, like we never thought that that'd be the case for us. We thought we'd be together forever. But life has its own intentions. And so before the pandemic, before he flew, we kind of were on those terms where, we were separated. But I had like this sort of, like hope. And really what it was a desperation, and I didn't realize it up until now, but it was a desperation that I would fix myself and I would be the kind of person that was worthy of being with him. And so this is like the kind of the rumination that was happening in my head constantly, like, that, and this, now looking at it now, like it's so it's so unhealthy. I could tell how unhealthy it is, because I would never change myself for anybody else at this point. And moving forward in my life, like it's like, why would I do that? But the person that I was operating as, and the personality of like the people pleaser and the self-abandoner, and the completely distorted weight that I was giving to other, right? It's like I had no sense of myself, and my life really was, it was valuing somebody else. It was like somebody else was the corner of my life. Somebody else was like the sun in my life, or the earth in my life. Like they were the center of my life, quite literally. And so I broke when he said that he wasn't. Literally, my body started like rejecting this notion, or the reality, right? Like it was just having such a hard time. And I remember I felt like physically sick for the first time. Like I couldn't eat for the first time, and that had never happened before. So it was just a very, very difficult time. This was like 7 years ago, and this, like, it started like a 7-year cycle that was just tremendously difficult for the both of us in our relationship. And mind you, again, like, we had been together for like 20 years before this. So the last 7 years were a very difficult period. I had let him go. Then he ended up letting me go. When, I kind of walked away from him, I realized like this wasn't working, because I finally, for the first time, saw his stuff as his stuff. And I had enough space, it wasn't enmeshed with me. Like I wasn't suffering for it, when I would witness it. And so I realized like, oh, okay, this is not, something was like, realized that it wasn't compatible, and something didn't reach out to him or respond to his texts or whatever. And so we kind of went our separate ways for a little bit, and then he ended up doing this work. And I remember just months later, for out of the blue, somehow he had messaged me again, and this time his energy felt different. And and then ever since then we've been talking, and now what's so interesting is that we've been working together, and it just seems like our relationship is way, way, way better. It's like, it's actually normal. It's like coherent. It's like there isn't the other like drama as much. There isn't like the other stuff that would get in the way as it would before, even in our personal relationship. So that's a huge, huge leap. It's like, not only are we able to like have a personal relationship now, but like after, like just recently we started, like it's been like 6 months maybe of having a personal relationship. But just recently, like in the last like month or two, like we started actually, working together, which has been like, you can actually tell, you can actually notice like the differences already. And I think this is what both of us were actually, like we had envisioned before. We had both secretly wanted this. But because of, both of us had just a lot of trauma, just a lot of like stuff that we had to work through on our own. That's why it never happened before. But it's amazing, things happen when the time is right. And it's so wonderful because he's just, started his own venture, and I'm at a time and a point in my life where I'm starting my own community for women. And, both of us are helping each other, and we're just trying to figure things out as we go. There are certain things that I fear, like, I don't know how I'm going to do, both things together, but they're just fears, right? We can literally just take it as it goes and see, what ends up happening, right? The whole idea, right? Like, I was going to say, I do know that if you want to go all in on something, you have to focus full time on it. But I also know that you can do something, right? And then you need a break from it, right? So when I need a break from it, I literally have to do something else, right? Change my focus, right? For a little while. So maybe it'll end up working out anyway, but we'll see. And then the company that he, created so far is just, it's just so brilliant because I know his potential, and I've known him all my life, basically, right? Except for like the first 13 years that we were alive. But it's just so beautiful to see, like, his finally, his potential being exercised in the way that like we've been talking about for decades now, at least a decade. And what he's done is he's really created a company which is a voice automated system, a voice AI system that routes all of the phone orders for restaurants. And this is how we're starting. We're starting with restaurants, but it routes all of the phone orders straight to the kitchen so that the people that work at the restaurant don't actually have to pick up the phone. And that's so, so valuable, because if you've ever been at a busy restaurant and you see, like, like that they're on the phone while they're trying to help you, or even if you've just experienced that yourself, where you've called a restaurant and you're like, oh my gosh, this place is always busy, or nobody picks up the phone. It's for a reason. It's because the place is like slammed, right? They're jammed. Like, they have people, like, they can't handle, like, the volume of calls. So what he's done is he's created a system and really built an infrastructure that I don't think exists yet. And I know there are other companies that are doing this, but he's really working around the clock to provide features and really outdo all of the products that exist so far. And the way that he is, he's so brilliant that I know, like, even without my understanding, my technological understanding, I know that he's creating something that is a behemoth of a product. Just because I know how he is as a human being, and I know his brain really is a superpower. And he's worked on the product so much. Literally, he's working like 24/7, like around the clock. He's been eating like 2 meals a week for like 2 months now, which is, we definitely got to take better care. But I know that all of his hard work will pay off. And just today, I was calling a bunch of places to to have this conversation with them to see if the system is something that would benefit them. And he's helped me so much with sales. And literally, when we started living together, one of the really beautiful things that he did for me, just out of the love and out of the goodness of his heart, and this is what I understand as tough love, right? This is when I think about tough love, this is what I think of. And it was actually just pure love. Like, he wasn't even tough at all, but he was like, I'm not gonna do it. I'm not going to do it, He's like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to take one customer service call for you. And the reason that he did that is because he wanted me to get better. And I remember when I first started living with him at like 22, 23 years old, I would beg him. I would be like, please, can you please take this call for me? Can you please take this call for me? And he wouldn't do it. And I would be like, oh my gosh, like, I hated the idea of it. And then getting on the phone with somebody, I just like, again, all like this anxious energy. And what I can like draw from looking back on who I was back then, again, it was all like this mental energy that was blocking me. I wasn't speaking in any way, right, like compared to how I am now. Like, I was literally like stuttering and even unable to listen, because a lot of the mental energy and the mental suffering that I had would keep me from actually being present. And many of you probably resonate with that as well. I've really come to understand that mental suffering, right, we can call it ADHD, or we can call it, whatever it is. But when it gets really noisy, it's the coping mechanism of the mind. And what happens is, like, if your chatter is like, 24/7, or it's like all the time, it really keeps you from being present. And so I had that problem all my life, basically. I couldn't pay attention even in a conversation with somebody, even though I really and genuinely enjoyed connection out of like more than anything. I wasn't able to really actually be present for it. And so I remember, that was one of the decisions that he had made early on, that he wasn't going to help me with any customer service calls. And it actually ended up being one of the best things for me, because it was one of the things that actually aided in my discovery of my power of speaking. And when I first started, living with him, I remember I hadn't really spoken much. I didn't really talk much before that. But he was just the most articulate human being, and we would have conversations, like really riveting and intellectual conversations. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, this is the first time that I'm actually, stringing sentences together to like, have a conversation. This was the first time I remember doing that. It was when I was living with him. And so a part of that, right? That was like the really big thing that helped me unleash my speaking and practice my speaking. It was just talking to him all day. And then the other thing that really helped was like talking to strangers, right? Which is really customer service, or just talking to people in ways that you really fear, right? You have this idea that, you don't know what to say, or like you hate, like, the idea really is that I hate making those kinds of calls, and you're not really sure why that is, or how that, maybe it was an experience that you had, or something that's sort of like this strong fear, like just became planted in you. But I remember in the beginning I dreaded it so much, but then I don't know, like, it may have been like maybe 5 7 years, and then I was like, I literally, like, I would meet people, and meet some of my really close friends, like calling some of like these customer service companies like lifelong friends, like sisters, like sisterhood sisters, like people that I would never I probably would have never met. I mean, I couldn't have met if unless I had made that call to that company and met them. So I'm really, really glad that he did that for me. And the reason I bring this up is, well, in helping him reach out to these restaurants, to see if the system is something that would help them. I literally talked to him after I made like 30 calls today, and I remember, well, I called him because I had I talked to him about how the calls went, and he's such a sales genius because he's worked in sales like all his life, but he's literally, like, he has so many skills to the point of expertise, and that's why he's actually developing this thing, because he's like, usually the person that develops is not the sales guy, but he really is both. He's like the one that's training, and that has to train. I was telling him, I was like, you have to train like our team of 4 or 5 people that we have so far, because it would be a waste if you didn't. Because he is like the expert in sales. Like he's just genius, and that wasn't something that he was born with. It was something that he flexed in his life. It's a skill. Like his ability to talk to people is something that he wasn't born with. He actually had to develop that, and he developed that over years in his life. And now he's like, if you hear him have like a sales conversation, he's unbelievable. He's just the most genuine, most like present, most like what it actually is just understanding human psychology, and actually just being present with somebody on the phone. And that's all it is. There really is no tactic to it. It's really just being human. And that's something that he taught me, like, and something that I get all the time, even when he'll do like role play with me, or he'll be like, so how did those calls go, or like how did, like, what did you say in the beginning, or stuff like that. And whatever I learned from him is just so brilliant. It's really, really incredible, because I can't even imagine, I can't even begin to tell you the impact that he's had on my speaking. And literally, like, I was born, I don't want to say I was born a writer, but I was definitely born a writer at 11 years old, after my dad died. There were a few months within, like, I think a month, or actually maybe within a few days, I had I opened my diary that I had for like months before that, and it was just completely blank. And that was the first time I actually wrote in it. It was like a few days after my dad died. And then within the coming months, I started writing in it, just poetry. But I never actually took writing seriously until I was like 22, 23 years old. And then when I sat down, I remember, and actually started realizing the value that writing had in my life. It was like a discovery of discoveries. And that was the beginning of my love for writing. It was literally when I was 22 and a half years old. And I remember sitting on the mattress in the floor of my partner's apartment, and rewriting the story of like my past, my relationship with my mom and my dad's death. And literally that was when I was 23. And so for the next I'm 38 now, I've been writing consistently all throughout, and I've written millions and millions and millions of words, thousands of pages. Like I can't even, like when you journal, there's really, really no limit. And there were times where I would journal. I mean, I would always journal first thing in the day, but there were times where I would journal multiple times a day, because I would just get so triggered. My ADHD, my deeply feeling, self would suffer so much, like on a daily basis and on a moment to moment basis. Sometimes there would be 2, 3, 4 times a day that I would be writing, just because I needed that outlet, because I was suffering so much. And again, with my mental suffering, like it was just like a constant thing. It was just very difficult to function, because things were just causing me so much suffering. And I didn't realize at that time that my partner, I didn't know, I hadn't had the knowledge of like safety and nervous system regulation, and safe people and safe spaces, right? I didn't have that knowledge back then, and I didn't know that my partner wasn't a safe person for me. But it's really amazing that he became one, and it's really incredible. I remember we like went through a lot of difficult things, but it always takes 2 people to attract each other and sort of play out this dynamic. where one person is sort of like, is controlled by the other, or whatever dynamic, that exists that is like really unhealthy. Everything ultimately at the end of the day is like, a want or need for power. And when there isn't a healthy balance of power in a human being, right? Like a parent is overly or underly in their power, what happens is that imbalance sort of gets passed on to their child, and then maybe can create the same imbalance in their child, or the opposite imbalance in their child. And I think my partner experienced that, from his mother as well. Maybe early on he had too much power, and even when I was with him, maybe he had too much power. But really what that is, just a need for control, because he didn't have like the stability of having like a healthy balance. And so when you don't feel safe, right, of course you're gonna need to control. And you don't really understand these things when you're with somebody, or even from the surface when we hear about these things happening in society. Like there's a thought right away, like we want to judge, like why is that person that way? But when you actually understand what it is, it's actually just like that person didn't have safety, and so they have a need for control. And to think that somebody, a parent, could actually not say no enough, or not be sturdy enough where their child feels a lack of control because of that, right? It's not just the opposite. It's not the parent that lets you do whatever you want to do and stuff like that. I mean, I guess it's the same thing that I'm talking about, but it's not just the opposite as in having a parent that's a really strict disciplinarian, or like that's running like the house like a Nazi or like a military regime. It's not just that, it's the opposite too. So somewhere in between, and this is the fault of us human beings, right? We don't understand where our distortion of power is, because we're carrying that in our life, right, from our parents, right? And it just takes someone to do the work, right? It takes one of us to break the cycle and actually sit there and actually look and see where the imbalance is in us. And often we don't know that, right? Again, because when you're just operating in your life, you're just operating as whatever you are. You don't know that you're balanced or imbalanced, right? You just are, right? And so whatever it is that sort of like causes you, or is the catalyst for you to actually look deeper and do this work, God bless that, right? It's so intended. It's so fundamental to your work, to your worth, to your character, to your life, right? It changes your entire life when you do this work. And I remember my partner and I, before he had done this work, I was having conversations about my own healing journey with him, and he couldn't understand any of it. And I actually triggered him and actually angered him, because he wasn't able to understand it. And I think whatever his own fears were, in relation to me, telling him about this stuff, but somehow or another he found himself doing his own work. And it really I would tell him, talk about like the importance of like doing this work to reach your potential and be the leader that you are supposed to be, right? And that you can't actually do that, you can't achieve your potential without integrating your whole self, which means you have to sit with the parts of yourself that you don't want to look at, right? The painful parts, the really traumatic things that have happened in your life, right? The pain, right? You have to sit with the pain in order to really live, to be the person that you were born to be the kind of leader, to live your potential, to have the kind of effect and change and influence that you want to have on somebody else. And at that point you don't even want to have the change, you just are it, right? And it's no longer like you're thinking about or judging, or like even have like an attachment to how somebody else is. And I remember my partner telling me this, because he was like, yeah, one of his really close friends, he would sort of like prescribe something over and over, and his friend wouldn't listen or abide by his instructions, and then my partner would get upset, or he would get mad. And then I realized, and he was telling me, he was like, when I actually experienced like what that was in myself, or that same thing that I that his friend was telling him about, like his friend's problem, he said I experienced the same thing in myself, and I saw for the first time that I couldn't actually control it, right? Whether it was being distracted or whatever my partner like visited in his own psyche, made him able to relate and resonate with now the people who he couldn't understand before, and maybe had just judged, or maybe like would get angry, but just simply because he didn't have the understanding in himself that comes with the experience, that only came with the experience. And so it's a really wonderful thing to then operate from reality, and then to actually see, like, because when you don't have attachment, what you're actually more able to do, you're more likely to be able to do, is actually prescribe, right? Or not even prescribe, right? Not even with that energy, right? But to suggest maybe something that might actually be closer to what might actually work for that human being, right? So if you have something in your life that really, really worked for you and you're like, oh my God, you gotta try this, you gotta try this, right? You can already see that energy, right? Like maybe it's not the best fit for the other human being, but when you are clear and present in reality, right? When you're clear and present in yourself, you are actually more in touch with reality, and you're better able to actually figure out or propose a solution that is closer to working for the other human being standing in front of you. And that's just how it goes, right? You can't, like, that's the thing though, like when you're attached to like these certain things, these sort of things that have worked for you, or like, it's like the medicine for you or what has worked for you, like you have an attachment to it, and you go and start prescribe it to people that, I mean, you prescribe it to people that didn't even ask for it a lot of times, right? It's like you're just projecting your stuff onto other people. And what's so amazing about this is that, well, we attract these people that are on this level of healed or unhealed wounds, right? We attract the same level of people that who are at the same place, who hold the same frequency as we do, right? Wherever we go, at every single phase in our life. So it's really amazing. Two things actually: to have the same people grow with you, right? For, in this case, like, me and my partner, somehow, we're here, and my partner and his best friend, right? Even after my partner changed a lot, for to have certain relationships that continue to grow with you is truly a blessing. And so, and then the other thing that's really wonderful about it, slips my mind right now, but I'm sure it'll come back. But I think to myself, how much I really held back from speaking. And really what it is, I've realized with my ADHD is that my flow is just a lot faster than most people's. And then also what I thought the pace that I should be speaking at, and even like auditorily, what I should be listening to, the pace of what I should be listening to. And so many times now when I'm struggling, I realize it's because I'm not speaking fast enough. Actually, my brain is actually processing and operating a lot faster than the rate at which I'm speaking. So I really just have to get myself on that wavelength, get myself on that frequency, and get myself in that flow state, and to match the pace of my brain. Same thing for auditory. Like when I listen to something, I've noticed that actually when I listen to something at a faster speed, not always, right? But when I listen to something at a faster speed, it's actually easier for me to listen to. So what happens with people that are, either on the autism spectrum or ADHD or just neurodivergent, or even if you don't identify as neurodivergent, which I didn't know all my life, right? I didn't know I had ADHD. I'm 38 now. It's only coming out of it in the last 4 years during the pandemic that I actually realized, oh my gosh, this is ADHD. And I had the suspicion, like, many times in my life before, but it was actually I never confirmed it. I never got diagnosed. But what happens is, if you have a certain way of like operating in your brain, and you realize, oh my gosh, like you could be really intelligent, or you could feel very deeply, whatever it is, you realize that you're actually the world is actually moving too fast for you, or just certain things, right, that we learn, like, oh my gosh, there's just too much stimulation. It's the wrong kind of stimulation, right? Like all these sounds that are just unnatural, like all these things. It's not that it's too much, it's the wrong kind of stimulation. But if I do have the right kind of stimulation, right? If I'm doing the things that I love, if I have more of like the right kind of stimulation, I actually thrive, right? So maybe it isn't overstimulation in that sense, but that's something that it could still be the case, right? Being overstimulated. But I realize a lot of the things, right, like having technology all the time, like in my hands, like it's something that I let go of, like when in the last 4 years. Like I realized my body just became very sensitive to looking at my phone all the time, or like just I don't use my phone that much to text message. I don't look at my phone all the time. I'm not social all the time. I'm not, I just don't engage in social connection all the time. There's certain times of the day where I'll do it, and there's certain times, like, where I won't, because I've come to just really realize what's best for my brain, what's best for my body. And it's taken me a long time to get here, but I'm really glad that I have. And many times now, actually, what's happening is, as I'm working, I can actually answer those things, or like be like, send a text message to my aunt or my uncle or something like that, like, and have a social, like sort of engage, like, message that I send, but it's something that flows seamlessly into my work life, which is very interesting as well, because it's like when I'm actually operating at my potential, these sort of things don't exist so much. Like my nervous system won't get triggered by, the same things, right? By like, having, by being social, or by too much stimulation, too much sound, or like light even, right? Like these things won't, it's literally just my nervous system. And so to get myself to a place where when I'm actually operating at my potential, my nervous system is nowhere to be found, right? So I've been thinking of like what actually, how I can actually operate at my potential all the time. And one of the really wonderful things is speaking. And so if you're listening and this is something that's beneficial to you also, right? To actually find the things that you love to do and that your body and brain enjoy doing, that you get like lost in, and you're actually operating at your potential in. One of these things for me is speaking, the other is writing. And the reason for that is actually, as a child, I mentioned I was a huge people pleaser, right? So I actually had a huge, like an entire suppression of my speech, and literally of just being seen, even just existing. Like my entire inner world didn't exist because it was just so suppressed. So it makes sense to me. It makes sense for me at this point in my life, right? Like the two things that I really, really connect to, and for many years now, are both writing and speaking. And then also self-expression is a huge thing for me, right? So singing, I love singing, right? I love dancing, and it really makes sense because these were the ways in which I was really constricted um, as a child. And so it's a really wonderful thing to kind of go in the opposite direction, and not to just go in the opposite direction, but these are things that are so natural for me. These are the four things that I enjoy more than anything: writing, speaking, singing, and dancing. And I think that's so profound, so beautiful. It's like no matter what I do, those four things, like, will be a part of my life, and I even think about how I can integrate them into like anything that I'm doing, anything that I'm building, right? If I'm building a community for women, or if I'm creating content for social media, right? How I can, like, it's just brilliant, right? The fact that I can do all four of those is really, really amazing. And if you are interested in reading some of my writing, go check out my Instagram or my Substack. And then my singing and dancing. I mean, I hope I have more content with those. I do definitely have some singing videos up on my Instagram. But I think it's so nice to be at a point in my life now where I'm like, starting a company, my partner's starting a company, and I can actually think about how to integrate the singing into the content that I make now for the company and the brand. So it's really beautiful, and the dancing too. So it's going to be really, really amazing. Anyway, I hope this has been a good time for you, because it's been a really, really wonderful time for me. I hope you've been able to keep up with my pace, because it's the pace that actually works for me. And if I go any slower, I swear to God, I'm going to lose, control. I'm actually going to lose control of my flow. I'm going to get distracted. I won't be able to speak. I'll be sitting here in like space, just pausing forever. So I really appreciate you hanging with me. I love you so much, and I'll check in with you soon. God bless you. Have a great day.